Welcome back to Creepy Kitty Creations, and it is once again the most wonderful time of the year, Halloween! So this is probably not one of my scariest doll remakes, but I personally loved the movie M3gan, so we'll be making her today. I'm so excited. If you haven't seen the movie, this is what she looks like. And while the movie's not scary, I did really enjoy it because she's just so badass. So without further ado, let's get started. So this is the doll base we'll be using. She's not a ball jointed doll, she's just made out of plastic, except for her hands and feet, which are kind of rubbery. But as soon as I saw her face, I just thought she looked just like M3gan, and I was just completely overcome with the desire to make a M3gan doll. I honestly could not help myself. It was just instantaneous inspiration. So we'll be using this doll today. Like with most of my doll customs, I actually started with her outfit first because I really enjoy sewing. So I couldn't find the right ribbon for her bow, so I made my own using 3 different types of ribbon. And then I found this nice stripy fabric for her sleeves. I didn't want it to be bulky, so I'm basically just making sleeve cuffs that just sort of slip onto her arm instead of a whole shirt. And I think it'll work really well. So we're just going to hem both sides first because we want those neatened at both ends. 3, 2, 1, done! Those are all nice and neatened now. And now to make sure that they are nice and tight so they don't slip down. There we go! And this is what it looks like turned right side out. Does it fit? It fits! They look so good. I'm really pleased with how it came out. It's not quite the same fabric as what she has in the movie, but it's close enough. Now I actually already had these socks from a Rainbow High, so I'm going to make her some garters to hold them up because they keep sliding down. So I'm just using these little like the clips that you get for dungarees. I got the doll versions I think from AliExpress ages ago, and I haven't used them for anything, but I think they'll be perfect for this. Just mark it there, cut it to size, and stitch it onto her makeshift undergarments. And I had these bows, and they're the perfect colour match to her dress, so I couldn't help myself. This one's definitely not movie accurate. And now for her dress. I found the perfect fabric and was so excited to try this out. It was a bit confusing because of how she has those pleats in her dress, so I just did the best I could. And I think it's going to turn out pretty good, so I'm just pinning the side. I'm pinning the front to the sides, because this was actually made up in about 3 different parts. So we've got the front, the sides, and the back. So I've pinned them all together just to see how it's looking. It's a little bit long, but that's okay. So this should just fold over like this to make the pleat at the front of her dress. So we'll sew along all of those. I've already done the shoulder seams, and now they are all connected. She also has some sturdy sleeves that have an interesting sort of pleat in them to make them shaped. So we're going to make those by just using a little pleat here. There we go. See, it's a very structural shape for a sleeve. So stitch those to the dress, and they came out like this. And then we just want to neaten them by hemming them just along here. And I pressed them off camera because it was kind of tricky, but this is how they look all pressed. So now we can cut it to the proper length. And I'm just going to stitch down those pleats. Looks pretty hardcore with all those pins. I'm also going to I'm neatening the edges with glue so that they don't fray after I hem them. And this is how it's looking, all turned in the right way, neatened, and I think there's another pleat back here as well, so I'm going to sort that out after I neaten these edges for the Velcro. And this is the pattern for her collar. Spoiler alert, this one actually didn't work out, and it's not the one that I used for the final pictures. I had to quickly try and whip something else up because this just didn't work at all. I didn't account for being able to open up at the back. So this is what it looks like after remaking the collar pattern. I just used some domes so that they can do up. Now for the bow, I made this off camera, just tying it up with some thread, and the stuff that I made was actually too thick and just looked silly, so I just made up some of this white and red ribbon, and I'm just going to paint on the blue. I think it will look a lot better and more balanced. And this is the bow all assembled. I'm just doing some hand stitching to attach the long bits at the back, and just attaching that at the back of the middle section of the bow, like this. It looks so cute. Now let's try it on for size, see how it's looking with her sleeves. I'm so happy with it. It looks just like it. Now, it is missing the button, so I've just cut out a circle of foam, craft foam, and used the same fabric for her dress. I'm just gluing the edges and tucking them over to make sort of DIY fabric covered buttons. She's got 4 of them on the top of her dress. And all of the buttons that I had were too small and would have looked ridiculous covered in fabric, so foam was a very good alternative. See, look, a teeny tiny little button. And normally I prefer sewing things on. I mean, glue works fine, I just never really trust it, but I think it would look silly if I tried to stitch them on and the stitches would be visible. So I'm using some fabric glue here to glue them onto her dress, and I'll just keep pressing them to her dress for a good long while to make sure that they adhere really nicely. And that is her dress done, but she still needs shoes, so we're going to make some shoes using hot glue and resin, starting with wrapping the foot with some tin foil, really nice and tight, but she's also wearing socks, so I wanted to allow for the thickness of that. And then we're just going over the with hot glue. This hot glue shoe technique was actually taught to me by an Instagram and YouTube friend, SabakuNoshi. So if you haven't checked out her channel, be sure to do so. I'll have it linked in the description box and at the end of the video. So to get it nice and smooth, I'm using the heat of the nozzle of the hot glue gun just to get it as smooth as possible. So this is the one I've already made as a test. So now we just have to pop the foot out. There we go. And try and rip out as much tin foil as possible. But this stuff sure did want to stick, so I couldn't pull a lot of it out. But it's on the inside of her shoe, so you're not going to see it. No one has to know. And it fits, yay! But it does come a bit high up the foot, so we're going to trim this and make some nice crisp edges. So I'm just using some scissors to cut around and give that a bit more of a Mary Jane swoop. Now I'm just going over it with some UV resin. I wanted to, because I couldn't get the hot glue smooth enough. SabakuNoshi, she makes them perfectly smooth, beautiful, but I couldn't manage that with mine, so I thought one way to do that is we'll put on some UV resin, make sure it's fully cured, and then we'll get to sanding to get a nice smooth finish. This took so much sanding, but at least it was really easy to tell what was even and what wasn't, because these darker patches here is where it's not even with the layer that I've just been sanding, so then it's a really good indication that you just need to keep going until it's all that sort of brush washed out white. Well, it took forever, but I do think this is good enough. There are a few little patches that are really quite deep that I'm just going to fill in with a little bit more resin. And then I'll cure it and sand it down because those would definitely be noticeable when I paint it. And it didn't take very long, it was an easy fix for a much better result. Now for my favourite part, the painting. This is where it starts to really look like a proper shoe. Once that was dry, I covered it with UV resin and cured it to get a nice shiny finish. I'm really happy with them so far. And now Mary Jane's have a strap, so I'm just going to get some of this faux leather fabric and fold it in on itself, neaten all the edges and add a clasp. Now I originally was planning to put a magnet on the edge of it so that they like magnetize shut, so I glued a magnet on here. Spoiler, it didn't actually work, so I ended up having to get some acetone and rip the magnet off and just glue the straps down, which was disappointing, but we learn something new every day. I'm making the base of the shoe with foam, just cutting that down to size for each shoe because you've probably seen that they're not perfectly symmetrical, but that's okay. So this will make it look more like a proper shoe, and it will also have a little heel on the back, which I'm making here by just doing a little semicircle, and we'll just glue that straight onto the foam. And now I'm gluing the heel to the main part of the shoe. I'm using just normal craft glue, and I'll do the same for attaching this to the main shoe. But first we're going to make sure that this adheres really well, so I just use some of those bull clips, and I've painted them black off camera when they're totally dry. So we'll break out some UV resin again because there is an obvious join where the bottom of the shoe attaches to the heel, and I don't really want that line there. So I'm going to go over it with UV resin, and then once that's cured I'll paint it, and then it will just look like one solid piece. Breaking out the tacky glue to glue the bottom of the shoe to the main part of the shoe. And the shoes are pretty much done. That's how some of the paint hasn't worked quite so well, so I'm going to touch some of that up and fill in some of the gaps with some more UV resin because there is a noticeable gap on the side for some of them. So just some little touch-ups. Fill in those gaps, paint the parts that are still brown foam. Off camera I covered the soles in UV resin, and of course it goes quite wobbly, so I'm breaking out the emery board to file it down and get it nice and flat. And it's gone quite white, so I'm just going to quickly paint that again and then cover it with a very fine layer of UV resin. And let's see if they still fit. They do! They still fit! Yay! Now we need to add on the buckles. I think I made them way too long, so we're just going to measure them, get the other one, trim them so they're the same. And then we're going to mark where we need them to go and just add a bit of super glue and hold them on there really, really tight, not too far in because I don't want it to affect the fit of the shoe. So I just want the littlest bit of the strap to adhere there so that it's not going to affect the fit. And these are my very first fully customized shoes. I'm so happy with how they came out. Thank you so much, SabakuNoshi, for the tutorial and helping me with them. Now we can move on to her wig. I made the wig cap off camera and I'm just painting it to the colour of her hair. Now I was originally going to use this nylon hair, but I haven't had the best of luck with that, so I ordered this Mohair, and as you can probably see, it's not the right colour. It's pink. It doesn't show quite so much on camera. It looks closer to the sort of brownish blonde, but no, it's actually a really dusky pink. So I don't have time to order more, so I'm going to separate them and try my hand at dyeing them using this yellow dye. So I didn't really follow the instructions because it is just a small amount of hair, so I didn't put it in a pot and boil it or anything because I didn't want to lose any of the mohair because that stuff is so expensive and precious. So I just put it into boiling water in this bowl and literally only dunked them in for a couple of seconds before taking them out again because I didn't want them to go too yellow, because Megan's hair isn't really blonde, it's more of a, what do they call it, brown blonde. So yeah, I didn't want it too yellow, but as you can see, I was getting a bit nervous looking at it because it looks bright orange. So hopefully that will be a bit different when it dries. After they've all been dunked, I'm just rinsing them out and giving them a wee pat dry to get any of the dye left in, and leaving them to dry overnight. And as you can see, they are still bright orange. The test piece I did was a lot blonder, and no, yeah, this is really orange. This is my dream hair color. So green cancels out red, so I'm going to try and do a wash of sort of slightly blackened green fabric paint to see if we can tone out that red and bring it back to a bit more of a blonde. You can probably tell I've been watching a bit much Brad Mondo. It actually worked. It took out a lot of the bright orange, but it is still a bit too orange for Megan's hair. So my second try was actually using blonde hair dye. So I was hoping that this would just bring it back and lighten it several shades. So I'm just saturating that. Sorry, my head keeps getting in the way. And we'll see how this one turns out. Hopefully, what is it, third time's the charm? Oh my god, it looks so dark. It looks nothing like what it says on the box. It's still quite wet, so maybe it will dry lighter. I made the wefts off camera and I tried to make them quite thin. Thankfully it lightened several shades when dry, thank goodness. So I'm going to start gluing those onto her wig cap, bit by bit, and I'm really happy with the result. The colour looks a lot closer to the actual doll's hair. I guess, no, it's not really a doll, the actual robot's hair. So if you haven't seen M3gan, it is they call it a horror movie, and it's directed by the person who did Annabelle, but in my opinion it's not really scary. I think it's a really good movie for if you're starting to just get into horror and you don't want something too scary. Just parts of it I find it almost funny, and I like how it doesn't take itself too seriously and is almost like a tribute, but also taking the piss out of the horror movies. And I actually really liked that about this. I enjoyed it. What did you guys think if you've seen it? Did you find it scary or just enjoyable, or did you not like it at all? I'd love to hear your opinions. So now I'm just going to flip. I've done the first side of her parting, so we're going to flip that over and do the second part, which is a bit trickier, and I quite often end up doing it off camera because it is quite fiddly and you have to sort of hold it with one hand and push it with the other to get it as close to the flipped weft as possible. And I was just trying to avoid bald spots basically, because I didn't want her hair to be too voluminous. In the movie it sits quite flat, so that has been a bit of a struggle getting it to sit flat without having any bald spots. But this is what the parting's looking like now. I'm really pleased with it, though her hair is way too long. But that's okay. So see, there's a bald spot here. I'm just going to use part of a leftover weft to try and cover it. So if you are a doll maker and you have a wig that hasn't quite turned out the way that you wanted it to, never be afraid to go back in and see how you can change it. It's definitely worth it. So to flatten out her hair, I'm just putting over some Glad wrap and tying it off with a rubber band, and I'll just leave that overnight to get that as flat as possible before styling. So that's a lot flatter, but as you can see, this has a lot of volume and it's way longer than her hair. Her hair actually comes only halfway down her back. So we're going to give it a wee trim. And again, using the Brad Mondo method, we're going to split it into 3 sections, the 2 at the front and the 1 at the back, and trim it just above the rubber band. And just like Brad Mondo's YouTube videos, disaster struck and I cut it way too short. It looked so much longer when I cut it. I've never done this on a wig before, and honestly I was absolutely gutted because this is so much shorter than it is in the movie, and honestly it was really bugging me. It's supposed to be here, like halfway down her back, and it's not. So I'm actually going to go in with some of the bits that I cut off and some leftover. I'm going to make some new wefts, and hopefully I can salvage this wig because it's really going to bug me. So I'm just flipping it back over just to find some space where I can add these wefts to fill in some bulk, because you could actually see her scalp along this side as well, and I wasn't happy with that either. So these are the longer wefts, and we're going to kind of do like what people do with the half wig extensions, and we're going to glue them halfway down her scalp to add on a bit of length, like an extension might do. And we'll see how this goes. I've not done this before, so I'm really hoping it works out. Okay, that's not looking too bad. Although there's this one part that just doesn't want to stay down. This part here is a little bit too short too, so I'm going to add another weft here. Just to hopefully give it a bit more of a transition from the front of her hair framing her face to the back. And it's given it a bit more length. I'm really pleased. Except for this part sticking up like crazy tarantula legs. There we go, that's better. I sprayed it with a bit of hairspray and then got out the Glad wrap again. So that actually did add a little bit of length, and I'm much happier with that. Thank goodness, because there was so much work getting that mohair the right colour. As you can see, she got a little black splodge on her nose when she fell over when I was cutting her hair. But that came off with a bit of alcohol. So I'm just going to spray her face with a bit of Mr. Super Clear, and we can get started on her face up. I'm just going in with some skin tone shades of pastel. I really don't want to go too over the top with this face up, which always makes me a bit nervous. As if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I quite like a lot of the more hardcore makeup looks because I find them easier. They hide a multitude of sins, and well, and they're just really, it's fun to do something different. So when it's a doll with virtually no makeup or a no makeup look, I find those a lot more difficult and stressful, just like the Rin doll from the Inuyasha Wheel of Fortune. I found her face up a little bit stressful as well because it's just like this one, no makeup really, just skin tones and shading, but it was a lot more fun than I thought, and I actually really enjoyed this. I tried to do some shading under the eyes to get that little eye bag look, and then it's just going in with some lighter, some darker skin tones, making the lips a bit more lip colour, and just sketching in her eyebrows and adding some shading to her nose. I hope you've all been having a really good Spooktober. What kind of movies and books do you guys like to read or watch around this spooky season? Let me know in the comments below. I personally love watching Sleepy Hollow, Hocus Pocus, and Practical Magic. They are, well, actually, and Sweeney Todd. I know it's not really a Halloween movie, but I always watch it around Halloween. I was originally wanting to do a doll of Katrina Van Tassel from Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow for Halloween, but given my book launch was this month and I'm absolutely shattered even attempting to do her striped dress at the end of the movie, I don't think I would have been able to do it in time, and it's a doll I've been wanting to make for a really, really long time, so I want to give myself all the time that I can so I can actually enjoy patterning out her dress and doing her face up, because yeah, she's got the most awesome costumes in that movie. And again, we learn why I should have been called Clumsy Kitty, because I swear I dropped her head 5 times during this face up. I don't know if it's a different doll than I'm used to using, so I don't know if it was just big or slippery, but I just kept dropping it. I think I forgot to talk about the doll base, but by golly, is it a beautiful doll. I have absolutely adored working on it. Everything is at a bigger scale than Monster High, so that's been really interesting, but probably the most important thing for this particular doll is that the back of her eyes actually, like inside her head, the eyes are sort of, they've got this casing already pre-built in, so they stay in without even having to put any putty in, so I didn't have to spend 2 hours putting her eyes in, unlike the Teke Teke doll. And this time I'm trying to really not be too heavy-handed with them. I usually don't mind too much about that because a lot of the eye structure is going to get covered by some really hardcore eyeshadow, but that's not the case with this doll, so I'm trying to be really light-handed, and I cut off the bristles of one of my brushes to get this really, really super fine, almost like a blending brush, and oh my gosh, I wish I'd thought to do that sooner. It's amazing. But it just blends the pencil so much better. Before I was using like a cotton swab, and it's really not precise, so I stopped doing that pretty quickly, but this is great, especially for under the eyes here where you want it to be a bit more subtle shading. It's quite interesting doing a face up for a character that is also like a doll or a robot, because Megan's face, it's got a bit of the uncanny valley going on. Like, you can tell she's not quite human, but at the same time it's really realistic looking. So it's kind of interesting doing that on a doll. Because her face up is more subtle, I didn't actually use black for this one. I just went in with dark brown, and because she's not wearing eyeliner, it's basically just shading around the eye. I tried not to go too heavy with this and just sort of went into the eye socket and then just a little bit over into the eye here, just to give it that bit of shading. And making sure my pencil is very, very sharp, I start doing her lower eyelashes, which I still have trouble doing. Like, Jackie O has beautiful lower eyelashes, and so does Moonlight Jewel on her dolls. I try and use their dolls as a sort of inspiration and guide, but I still can't quite get them right. But they turned out a lot better than I thought they would, so that was a win. I don't know, I think I just have a bit of trouble getting them the right curve, or what's the other word? Like, they look quite cute and fluffy on a lot of BJDs. So I was trying to get that look this time. I think it's didn't quite get them the way I would have liked, but much better than I usually do, so I'm happy about that. And now I'm going back in and doing a bit of shading under her eye and around the corner of her eye, just to get a bit more definition. Since her eyes are so easy to put in, I keep putting them in occasionally to test how she's looking and her expression, because I find it very hard to tell if I've gone too far or not far enough with my shading. I'm adding a little bit of the white Pearlex powder just to give her that wee bit of shimmer. And you know, I have to put it on the inner corner. I don't think I've ever done a doll that hasn't. Now I'm just wetting the brown watercolour pencil and painting her, well, not really eyeliner, but just to give a little bit more depth and a nice crisp finish. And I've done this for her eyelashes and eyebrows as well, just to get some nice dark paint strokes in there. And it really does make a huge difference. Like, whenever I finish just using pastels and watercolour, I think, well, this looks good enough. Well, I probably don't need to do wet watercolours. But then I do the wet watercolours and it's like, you know, it needs them. It always needs them for me. It adds more 3D elements and just makes it pop more. Adding some little lines to her lips. Nothing too bold, but just very subtle. And then adding the highlights to her waterline. Looking so much better. I'm just going to pop her eyes in and do some final tweaking, especially with her the top of her eye and her eyebrows. I find that it's really hard to tell whether those are okay until you've got the eyes in. So I'll do another spray of Mr. Super Clear, and now I'm just adding gloss to her lips and waterline. And that is her face up done. I added some 3D lashes off camera just because they were really, really fiddly. There they are. Just subtle, nothing too big, just to suit how she looked in the movie. So let's add her shoes. I've glued the straps on this time, so I'm glad they still fit. So this is her dress. Pop her head on. Wow, not often that sounds weird out of context. And adding her wig. And she's done. What do you think? Do you think she looks like she does in the movie? How do you like this doll sculpt? I personally love it, and I cannot wait to make another doll out of this particular doll mode. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a happy Halloween. Give this video a like if you liked it, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye!